serious, it's fun, it's your Catholic drive time.
With Joe McClane and EmilyiAlcaraz.
So it's a beautiful thing to see an organization like Shout My Story that embraces the dignity of life, even life that others consider not even worthy to live. And to talk about that, Cynthia Morales has joined us now from Shout My Story. Good morning to you.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Praise be to God. It's good to have you. We only have about 3 minutes before we have to take our break, but we'll have another segment after that. Cynthia, it's good to have you here. Tell us about Shout My Story.
Well, Shout My Story is an ongoing project of our organization, which is called Pro-Life Champions. And my husband founded Pro-Life Champions in 2011 to make our first project, which was called the 40 film, which looks at abortion as a human rights issue. And while we were promoting that film, we met a lot of women who had chosen life instead of abortion. And after we met a few, we were like, wow, those are great stories. We should say, instead of like the narrative being, I was in a bad situation and I had an abortion and here are the negative consequences, it's like, I was in that exact same situation, but I chose life, and here's my story. And so the first story we did was called The Story of Mary Grace, which is on our YouTube channel, Shout My Story. And that's a couple who had a baby with anencephaly, and they were urged to abort at 20 weeks, which at the time I thought was very strange, even though when I was teaching theology, I had a student who wrote a paper who had an abortion when she was 6 months pregnant because the doctor told her baby, there was something wrong with her baby, and she had an abortion, and she wrote about it in her paper. And I just didn't realize that this is normal for doctors to encourage women to abort. So within our Shout My Story project, which we have several short videos which are straight to the internet and social media to encourage women to choose life, we decided to make a longer documentary called Incompatible with Life, which features women who are told to abort by their doctors. So those are the projects. It's an ongoing project called Shout My Story, but within it are short films and then a longer documentary that we just released.
Wow. Cynthia Morales is our guest. Shout My Story, shoutmystory.org is the website. But that line, incompatible with life, that is the strangest phrase. I mean, to think about.
You know what it reminds?
Go ahead.
It reminds me of the Lieben. I can't remember how to say it now. Lieben something Wertes. It's the German. They used it when it was life unworthy of life. In 1938, they started killing disabled people in something called Action T4, where they decided that people who were not, these were Germans, these were Aryans, only they were disabled. And doctors and nurses using science started killing them by the thousands. And when Germans found out about it, they were upset, but then they just put it underground, and they killed over 200,000 disabled people between 1938 and 1945. That's what it reminds me of.
Wow. Can you imagine? Because they aren't good enough, because they don't have much to offer. And we've reduced, I was talking earlier before we jumped on about the pornified brain that can't see humans for what they really are. Well, it seems like that's what the Germans were doing too. But don't go anywhere. Program. I want to go back to Incompatible with Life, because it's just so mind-numbing to think that doctors who are trained to save lives, trained to uphold the morality and ethics of caring for human beings, would be the ones through which they would receive the advice that they should abort this children because this child cannot offer anything good and is incompatible with life. It is just so contrary to reason that it's hard to believe that the shock that these families must have had in hearing that from a doctor's mouth.
They do. That's one of the reasons why every family who participated in the film wanted to help make it, because they wanted to give a message to doctors that their children are not unworthy of life, and quite frequently they're not even incompatible with life for real. Like, they don't die at birth. The only family that their child had died shortly after birth was the first family, Mary Grace, because she had anencephaly. But the other children have disabilities that are treatable, and if they are treated, they can live. But I think that it's important, too, to notice that the doctors think they're doing the families a favor by recommending termination. kids with Down syndrome now with treatments live pretty much normal lifespans. When I was a kid, Down syndrome kids died by the time they were 12. Like the average lifespan was 12. And that's because they had heart conditions that they didn't treat. Partly because they didn't know how. And then when they found out how, they actually had ethical conversations. Should we give kids with Down syndrome heart surgery? Is that ethical? That was a conversation in the 1970s.
That's crazy.
No one would have it. It is crazy, and no one would have it now. But that's the conversation that ethics committees in hospitals have with kids with trisomy 18 now, because trisomy 18 is a severely life-limiting diagnosis, and they see these children as burdens. And they will tell the families, you should terminate because this is going to destroy your family. This is going to ruin your finances. This is exactly what someone in the film says. Your other kids are going to, be resentful, and so they think they're doing the families a favor by recommending termination. And our families wanted other families to know there's resources out there to help, and that this does not destroy your family. In fact, it builds compassion. It builds love. The kids with trisomy 18 are the most loving kids in the world. In fact, the doctor said, I can't remember if this is on the film or not. I don't think it is. It's in the B-roll. He said, we can tell when trisomy 18 kids are sick because they're not smiling. Mm-hmm. They're the happiest kids in the world when they're feeling well, and we can give them treatments to help them feel well. So we wanted to let people know that doctors they're not God, and sometimes they think they are, and they think they have the power to decide who lives and who dies. And this also reflects a utilitarian viewpoint of human beings that has grasped our zeitgeist in our society. We have the triple, I call it the unholy trinity of relativism, materialism, and utilitarianism. And utilitarianism is the idea that you're only worth being around if you're useful. And that is like psychotic. It's like a psychotic way of viewing the human person, to only define us by our worth, by if we're useful, instead of, hey, you have worth because you are a human being. That's all you need. That's the only ticket you need to be useful. I mean, to be human, to be worthy.
Right.
So
this is the culture of death in a nutshell. That Pope John Paul II spoke about so often, is that we live in a culture now that sees the value of a human person and what they can produce, and so now this is why we see Scandinavian countries that are like bringing back eugenics, that they completely wipe out the population of Down syndrome children in their countries because they don't even give them a chance at life. I mean, whose right is that to decide whether or not someone is worthy of living? And that's why I'm so grateful for all the work that you do, Cindy. You are so active in the pro-life movement and activism in general. Could you please share with us some of the other projects that you're a part of?
Well, pretty much Shout My Stories is what I'm doing right now, but do you want me to talk about the films that we've made?
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So we wanted to address different areas where, people choose abortion instead of life. About 70% of women who, according to the Guttmacher Institute, are the only people who collect these kind of statistics, 70% of women who choose abortion do so because they lack support. In other words, they don't really want to have an abortion, and they don't think about it as killing their baby, because if they did, that would be too painful. They think of it as, clump of cells or whatever. They're telling whatever lies they are. But if they had a partner that said, I have your back, then they would say, let's choose life. But they have partners who will either say, get an abortion, or whatever you want, I'll support you, which is code for get an abortion, in their minds at least. And so we wanted to, this year, we have a written story on our website of a young woman who chose life when she was in college. This is one we're hoping to film next month. I'm trying to nail down a date with her now, but she's getting ready to graduate from college, so kind of hard. But she was from a strict family from a different country, and when she found out she was pregnant, she thought about having an abortion because she was afraid of her family, and she wasn't sure what her boyfriend would think. But fortunately, her boyfriend was supportive, and her family, even though they were extremely disappointed in her getting pregnant, they ended up having her back. And so she chose life. We have another person that's already filmed named Karina, who we filmed at the March for Life, with a similar situation. She had just finished associate's degree. She was starting her bachelor's when she found out she was pregnant. She was from a strict Lutheran family. She wasn't sure, how they'd react, but it ends up that they were extremely supportive and they had her back, so she chose life. So what's the message for those families and those young girls who, that's the typical, I wouldn't say the typical, statistically, that's who gets abortions are girls 18 to 24 who are like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. I can't be pregnant. It'll ruin my life. It doesn't ruin your life. The person who inspired Shout My Story was 16 when she got pregnant, and now her child is about 41. And when we met her, this is when the light bulb really went on. Wow, this is a great story. When I met her, she was 36. Her son was 20 in the armed forces, and she was so proud of him. He had his, uniform. She had his picture, and she had a successful internet business. Being pregnant at 16 was a challenge, but it didn't ruin her life. So #you got this girl. And 5 years later, her son is now married and has a kid. So now she's a grandmother. So abortion doesn't just destroy one life. It destroys generations.
Yeah.
And when you choose life, you build generations.
Yes, so true. Cynthia Morales is our guest. Shoutmystory.org is the website. And it is really a great counter effort to the Shout Your Abortion story. Can you, as I was sharing before you jumped on, Cynthia, I was sharing my own, I'm post-abortive, and my own story of abortion and the negative effects it had in my life. And it was confession. It was a mystical encounter with Christ in 2002, and then confession that gave me freedom from the pain and the suffering of the damage it does. And it really does do so much damage. And so many people hold on to that for so many years, and it's just fermenting and destroying and eating away at their soul. I think the counter message here of the dignity of life, these families that embraced their supposed difficulties and found great joy in that, could really be a remedy to so many that are considering abortion and the pop culture around them that would encourage them to do so. How are you getting the word out, besides like us hopefully promoting it to our audience, of course, but how else are you getting the word out about the project?
It's actually, that is a challenge. I mean, I've been on Teresa Tomio's show on EWTN. I've been on Drew Mariani's show on Relevant Radio, so different Catholic radio programs. But our best partner is EWTN on social media because they have over 1 million followers. And so our short films have had over 2 million views, mostly on their pages. So our top story is actually called The Story of Rachel Mary, and that's another inspiration for this film because her mother was told that she was incompatible with life. And that's where we got the title, and that's where we first heard those words, which I want to emphasize, by the way. Incompatible with life is not a medical diagnosis. It's a subjective description of your baby. It's not a diagnosis, and they should not use that language. And activists who are working in that area specifically recommend that we change their language to life-limiting diagnosis. It's life-limiting. You're not going to have the same kind of life if you have a chromosomal abnormality or if you have a cleft palate even. You're going to have problems, but they're treatable. You can you can still live a full life when you have a disability. And P.S., even those of us who are abled, we can become disabled at any moment. Right? We could have a stroke. We could have an automobile accident. We could have some kind of other accident. My niece is in basic training right now. She just had an accident where she fell. She fell 7 feet and broke a bone in her back. She's recovering before she finishes basic now. The doctor told her if she had fallen slightly differently, she would be a paraplegic right now.
Wow.
This can happen to any of us anytime. If they're willing to terminate sick children in the womb, and they're willing right now to terminate old people for the exact same reasons, no quality of life, that's another phrase, quality of life, then how long is it going to be before they want to terminate anyone who doesn't have quote-unquote quality of life? And that can happen to any of us at any time.
And who gets to decide?
Hey,
who gets to decide what living a full life is? You know, like
Well, exactly.
who gets to be the measure of that judgment? At any rate, we're that music means we're out of time. Cynthia Morales has been our guest. The website is shoutmystory.org. Do us a favor, dear audience, go there, watch the film, and then share that the Incompatible Life documentary, as well as all the other films, with your friends and your family, all of your social media. Let's get the word out. Praise be to God. Cynthia, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
God love you and God bless you, and we pray that this will be just an incredible success. We want 1 billion views, but let's let it be the first 1 billion view video on planet Earth. That'd be amazing. All right, that is going to do it for the first hour of Catholic Drive Time. Praise be to God. If you can join us in the second hour, we would love to have you. Today is the day we give out the prize and pull a name from the Coffee Cup of Divine Providence. You can find the links to our show feeds on grnonline.com/CDT. We'll see you on Monday, 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern. God love you.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.